From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. There are people whose presence commands attention, not for the volume of their voice, but for the clarity of their energy. Alethia Austin is one of those people. A highly respected skydiving coach, event organizer, and international leader, Alethia is the creator of the LSD, Level Slot Dock, a skill camp series that is sold out around the world. Her thoughtful, holistic approach to coaching goes far beyond position and free fall. It taps into wellness, self-awareness, and energy management. Her journey to skydiving is as compelling as her presence in it. Raised in a small town in southern Oregon by a single mother alongside 4 siblings, Alethia knew early on that the environment around her didn't reflect the life she wanted. At 17, she left home and began a life path that would stretch across 3 continents. From working in a plastic surgeon's office in her early 20s, to spending over a decade in the music and film industry in Los Angeles, Alethia later transitioned into marketing and moved to Amsterdam. But the calling of the sky never left her. After a tandem jump in 2002, the seed that had been planted years earlier by a family friend began to grow. Following her marketing work with Skydive Hibbelstow, Spain, and Skydive Algarve, Alethia traveled through India in 2020, a journey that deepened her exploration of consciousness, balance, and wellness. She's been plant-based for over 20 years, a yoga teacher, and even a handpan player. But don't mistake any of that softness. Alethia is a force. A Project 19 regional captain, a respected safety advocate in angle flying, and a sought-after leader in the global skydiving scene. Today, Alethia continues to inspire students not only to become better flyers, but more self-aware humans. She speaks openly about death, emotional inventory, and how we fly is often a mirror of how we live. This conversation is one I've long wanted to have. It's thoughtful, grounded, and full of the spark that makes Alethia. I'm honored to welcome Alethia Austin to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Hello, friend.
Hi, friend. Thanks for the beautiful introduction.
Did I get it all right?
Oh, that was very beautiful, James. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Perfect. Great. So let's key right out of there from that intro, Alethia. Alethia, you've shared that you grew up in a small town in Southern Oregon. And as from your intro, your mom really raised you and your siblings, 5 of you kids all in together. Can you give me a sense of what your life looked like growing up? And what did your mom do to support the 5 kids?
Yeah. Wow, James. This has been a process of really getting comfortable kind of speaking about this, because we have there's such an impact on us when we're growing up, that it took me a quite some time to really understand what that looked like and to process all of it. To be able to speak in this way is really like this journey of growth and discovery for me. So it's a little bit of a win to be able to speak about it. But yeah, my mom was a single mom raising 5 of us. She worked in a lumber mill. She worked in a restaurant and did a lot of side jobs. Pretty much was just always working, trying to feed all of our mouths. We didn't necessarily have any father figures. There's 5 of us with 3 different fathers. And my mom just, she had, interesting choices for her partners, and they didn't necessarily work out. So she was left with all of us. She started having children at 16 and went through just her own struggles and her own journey through all of that. And she went down a road of quite some intense drug use. So my childhood was this mixture of deep poverty, um, with a lot of really darkness around. But the interesting thing, and what I think was the lifeboat for my brothers and sisters, was that my mom, in the midst of everything, was such a source of love. And my brothers and sisters and I were also such a source of love and support for each other, that in the midst of this utter chaos and at periods in our lives, hopelessness and despair, there was like a childhood of imagination and wonder and love and support, and kind of this normal bubble within what I later learned was just like immense darkness. So it's this interesting blend of, oh my gosh, that was pretty wild. And then also, oh, I love my brothers and my sisters, and my mom is my absolute queen. And it's very interesting.
You mentioned that period of time was a dark period, but anyone who meets you or refers to you, or even I've heard the expression said to you a lot, Alethea, you have a light about you. You definitely have, and I know you've heard this before, there is an aura about you, and it is a very positive aura. Do you feel that that was instilled in you even back then amidst that darkness, or did that come later?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I'm completely aware of it, and I'm so incredibly grateful for it. So incredibly grateful for it. I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was there, and I believe that the darkness and those years of of darkness really helped me define what it was and helped me connect deeply into what that source is through simply necessity of survival. Yeah, so it was there. I remember being a really young girl and like playing in the dirt and having this deep understanding that there was a lot more to the whole picture, and that everything happening on this kind of first dimension experience that I was having with all of this darkness was actually not everything. And there was a point in my life around 14 when it was really hard. It was the only time I've ever felt what hopelessness feels like, that I had to go deep inside and search for what the meaning is of this whole thing that we're doing. And I had to really call out and beg for some kind of a light. And that light that was shown to me also ignited the light inside of me. So it was there, and then it became just this force of certainty and faith and and joy.
I'm curious, not to delve too deeply here, but at age 14, how do you have the consciousness or the awareness that there's something more within that is there, that there's a resource, there's another gear that's deeper that you tap into? Because at 14 with hopelessness, that's so tough.
A lot of that, I believe, is a gift. I had a relationship. I was a little bit forced into a Christian faith through my grandparents, who I love so dearly. But it was I would go to church with them, kind of forced to go, which was a beautiful gesture of them, of course. But I would be living in this home where there was all of these just hard drugs everywhere, and really icky people everywhere, just absolute terribleness. And then I would go to church where the preacher would be saying that if you do all of these things, this is absolutely wrong and you're going to go to hell. So I never felt comfortable in church because I was living in what it would describe as people that would go to hell. And I was just sort of a passenger in that hell. So I understood the concept of God and religion, but it didn't really fit. But there was a fire inside of me, or somewhat of a candle lit for the idea that there was something greater. And so when I went through that time in my life around 14 where, everything was falling apart, my mom was falling apart, and even the depth that we were in was all breaking. And so there was just small things around me that I could lean into, and all of those were breaking. I was, yeah, looking at hopelessness and feeling it, and I didn't have anything to sort of pull me through that moment. And I realized in that moment how scary and dangerous that was. And so I simply cried my little heart out and I begged and I prayed and I pleaded for some sign of hope and of light, something. And I mean, I was having a discussion with a God. I was begging for it. And James, it came through. It was so obviously clear that I immediately received this answer. And that was it for me. It was like no 2 days were the same after that. I picked myself up. I navigated through that dark period, and I did it in a way where I was with so much faith that no matter what we weathered together as a family or myself alone, I was with faith at that moment. So it wasn't necessarily that I was this child at that time that just had this deeper understanding. It was really that, thank God, I was able to ask, and I simply was led there by that darkness. But I asked and I received, and that was a life changing for me.
At 17, you would leave home. Yeah, that's super young to go out into the world. It seems that you had clarity, like, I need to get out of here. So where did you go?
Yeah, I remember it was 2 weeks after I graduated high school, and I had $150. And I always think of that $150. That's what set my whole life. That's what I had in my pocket, and that's what has helped me through this whole life. Is that $150? I took a Greyhound bus to St. Stephen, New Brunswick, where my grandma Gladys lived. And I stayed there for a couple months hanging out with my aunties and my grandma and just kind of, yeah, figuring things out a little bit, raking the yard and raking blueberries to earn a couple bucks. And then I moved to Mount Hood with two girlfriends, and we rented a little trailer at the bottom of the mountain. And I worked in a cafe slinging coffee and snowboarding. And I was so broke, but like kind of doing it on my own. And then after that season, yeah, I moved to Los Angeles, and that $150 and that decision just always kept evolving into the next stage for me.
Before we move into that, how are your siblings? What are they all up to? Did they get out as well?
They did. Yeah. My siblings are amazing. I mean, they're incredible human beings. I have two older brothers, Tori, who owns his own business, Isaac, who's also owning his own business as an electrician. And then I have my sister, Franny, who is working for Nike as a director. And my sister, Whitney, who also has a yoga instructing license and is back in school for medical school. So I have these siblings who are incredibly light, active, and beautiful human beings, all really successful in their own right, and also all with this really big, light, beautiful energy. So incredible.
It is incredible. So many families that certainly are not presented with hope or something to look forward to, or, that there's an assurance that things are going to get better, would likely, I mean, maybe statistically, the odds are against you all turning out as well as everyone did. It's remarkable when you really think about it. And I have to wonder, do you ever think, Alethia, that, wow, look at the life that you're living now. Is it beyond what you could have even dreamed of? Or is it in line with your dreams?
It's really above and beyond, for sure. I mean, there was nothing around me that would support or encourage dreaming big in the home that we all grew up in. There was nothing really to aspire to have or be. School was not an option. Dreaming big just wasn't. It wasn't. It was a really low energy, very dark town that we grew in. A lot of poverty, so there was no concept of bigness. And so I am truly, and I say this a lot, and I really mean it, on my knees in gratitude every day, just in constant discussion with God of the blessings that I have and what this path has opened up for me. And then also my incredible family and how much we have not avoided, but just built our own way in such light. And we're all very blessed.
Extraordinary. If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. Burble. So, Alethia, you're now 18-ish, going to LA. Whew, welcome to all aspects of the world in one place. And I read that you even worked at a plastic surgeon's office. Is that right? Was that the start, or what was the first job when you get to LA?
The first job was at a wildlife way station. And I was through one girlfriend that I had on the mountain at Mount Hood. She was working as an animal trainer. So she got me a job. So I lived in North Hollywood, and I would do this 1.5 hour drive into the mountains above LA with this huge wildlife way station, which was the name of it. And go hang out with orangutans, and a friend would walk the tiger into the office where I was working. And it was just this really cool entrance into LA where I was doing something so bizarre, but hanging out with animals and meeting people that were really interested in animals. And then I'd go back into LA and I'd kind of be hanging out with, the LA people who were just a whole different breed on their own, real creatives, real educated people, real entrepreneurs, but also real Hollywood type. And, they really had a look. And it was just this interesting world that I was living in, toggling between the two. And LA was kind of, in a way, the place where I realized I had to almost retrain how I showed up in the world, because everything was still kind of on me in a way. My poverty was still very visible on me. My lack of clean social skills was kind of visible. It's like I didn't really fit in with the crowd that was pulling me in. And this was pre-working in Hollywood, but I was starting to have friends that had clearly grown up in really beautiful homes with beautiful families and kind of normal lives. And they were educated and they were just polished. And I was not at all, James. And I started to see that. So I remember so much. It was very confronting at that time, learning that I had this thing that I really had to sort through, which was my childhood. So I had to put time into learning how to grieve some of those chapters of my life and be soft on that little girl who had gone through all of that stuff and just let it kind of heal. But then I also had to really quickly show up in the world and show up well and look polished and speak well. And it was this full training in LA that I went through.
The word that comes to my mind is self-awareness, and how that happens in terms of, wow, I am different. Oh, I'm different. And then adapting. And it seems like that's a theme in what I've read in your different roles I didn't know about the wildlife way station to, I want to talk about the plastic surgery, because is that jarring to go, oh, wow, this is a different world. And how did you get to working at a plastic surgeon's office? How did that happen?
Yeah, that was also a connection that I had made where I was looking for something that wasn't so far from where I was living. And somebody introduced me to this doctor, and it was a really small plastic surgeon's office. And so I became his office manager. And that was totally bizarre as well, because there was no plastic surgery around where I grew up. I had never even known that people would change their lips or pull their foreheads back or all of these things. And so there I was, like 23, 24, in the prime of your youth and beauty. And I would every day be faced with these people coming in for different augmentations and alterations of their appearance. And they would so casually say, Alethia, maybe you want to plump your lips, or shall we get you a breast job or something? And it was like really getting comfortable with who I was in a natural way, being faced with people that were going through all of these changes in the way that they look, mostly for vanity, because that's a little bit of a thing in LA. And I would have to get really comfortable with like my crooked smile and my, non-perfect face. But it was such a good process for me to go through that at that time when everything was changing for me, when I was really going through the inner world healing and sorting, and then also becoming this woman showing up in the world in this different way. So it was such a valuable experience for me to be there. And then also it helped me enter the real workforce of just management and learning how to run an office and to be the right-hand woman of a doctor, which I had never been around in my life. So it was a beautiful, beautiful experience.
And then eventually you make a transition into the music industry for almost a dozen years. Tell me about that, because if I'm not mistaken, you're not a musician, or at least you weren't a musician at the time.
Completely. Again, somebody basically introduced me into the music world. And it was through a girlfriend of mine, Marcy, who is now my friend of like 24 years. What an absolute queen she is. So she was dreaming to be a music supervisor. And a music supervisor is somebody who will get a script of a film, figure out where music should go in the show, and then hire a composer, find the music that's already licensed or create the music that's licensed, do all the licensing of it, and then there's your soundtrack. So she had been dreaming of doing that. She had gone to school for music, and we became really fast friends through MySpace. Lo and behold, somebody came to me and offered me a job as a music supervisor. So I hired Marcy for her first role as a music supervisor. And I thought, well, we can figure this out together. I had no idea what I was doing. So we were kind of like, yes, we accept this role. This sounds amazing. And, we already started on this movie. And then immediately on the side, we're like, trying to read all the books about how to be a music supervisor for dummies, basically. And that kind of just opened up the door. I met more people in the music industry. And then two friends of friends were starting a company called A&R Select. They said, why don't you come on board and just kind of build this company with me? And so I did. I joined them as a bit of the office management in the beginning, like hiring the whole team, and then also bringing a lot of artists in. So I was doing artist scouting. Then I started to bring artists in to get their songs produced with us. And I would realize, as I was simultaneously a music supervisor, that some of these artists could come in and they would be the most amazing music. But the director of the film would want somebody that was really big or had a huge MySpace at the time following. They had great photos and they looked like that up and coming band. So there would be an artist that would come in, have the musical talents, and blow it out of the water in terms of what they sounded like, but they just wouldn't look cool enough online. So I started to work with those artists to make them look cooler online. So I'd write their bios. I'd get them the photographer from the wife of the partner that I had there. And we'd start to build them out on MySpace, make them look a little bit cooler so that I could pitch them to the producers and directors to hopefully get them signed for a movie, which would earn them a lot of money. So that's kind of where I started to learn marketing, although I had no idea that was marketing at the time.
Yeah, that's totally marketing. Perception. Perception is everything. So 10, 12 years doing that?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So A&R Select I think I was there around 4 years or so. And then music supervising independently for TV shows and movies, a couple commercials for another 5, 6 years. And then I was writing for music blogs down there. So going to a lot of concerts, I don't know, maybe 150 a year, backstage, all access, meeting the artists. Like, this is Alethea. She's a music supervisor. So I got this beautiful position to be able to meet like some of my most absolute favorite artists to try to get them into the movies, and also for writing for a lot of blogs down in LA. That was beautiful.
Who is the most famous artist that you ever met?
Oh gosh. I used to ride motorcycles with the Foo Fighters. They were a really big band. I mean, Muse, like, yeah, all of them really. Now I'm going to age all of them, but I mean, the biggest artists out there I was meeting. And it would maybe be a handshake, or it would be just a little backstage, or maybe they'd play in the living room of, like, I don't know, the VP of a big label. Really cool.
At least you've made it. You've come out of the small town. You have, and everything that you had to overcome. You're in LA. You're in the music scene. You're riding motorcycles with the Foo Fighters. Why'd you leave?
I left. My partner and I at the time, we were, he was also in the music industry, and it was such a beautiful place. But, I was toggling between feeling really, really cool because of my lifestyle, like red carpet walk with Oprah Winfrey one time and the Foo Fighters. I'm like doing weird stuff, James. And then also knowing it's just Alethea from Rogue River, Oregon. And I know my background. I know the little dirty girl who used to play in the dirt and had zero money in our family. So I never really bought the whole idea of coolness. And yet being in the music industry at that level, it was how you looked, it was who you know, it was a lot of things. You really had to kind of play this cool thing. And it started to feel really awkward for me because I'm actually not that cool. So I started to feel a little bit, I don't know, a little bit icky with it. And so my partner and I at the time, we thought, let's get out of here for a year. We both worked from home. So we bought a little, a little home in Santa Cruz in the mountains. And we just played with our dog, went for runs, worked from the laptops, made fires in the evening. And it was really cool. It felt like a nice spaciousness, and that we could kind of return to, yeah, not being cool and not being in LA. And then from there, that's when I moved to Amsterdam. It was about a year and a half in Santa Cruz. And my partner actually got a job in Amsterdam. And when I went over there to stay for just 3 months, I ended up getting a contract for a marketing gig. And I stayed for that 3-month contract, and then just started renewing my contracts every year from that point, thinking, this is pretty cool over here.
If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to invite you to be a member of a budding community with me on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests and gain access to some show swag. It's pretty sweet. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. Before we get down into that chapter, at some point during your period in LA, you intersect with skydiving. What was the circumstance that introduced you to the sport or making that first jump?
Yeah, my mom had a friend named Hoyt Patton, and Hoyt was a skydiver. And he didn't really show us any videos when I was a little girl, but I knew that he was a skydiver. And it wasn't this big thing because he was the only person that we knew, but I knew he was a skydiver. So I remember when I was working at that plastic surgeon's office, there was like one day where I was, again, feeling a little bit disoriented in LA because it took me a while, James, to really make all of these transitions in my life. And so it felt a little bit disorienting in some ways. And I had this thought, I should go skydiving. I want to go skydiving. So I pulled up the Yellow Pages, which is a book of paper with phone numbers in it for anybody listening that doesn't know about those. And I found a drop zone, Skydive California City. And I called them, and the woman, Alberta Prey, she was the owner, was so beautiful. She was so calm and just absolutely beautiful on the phone. So I made an appointment to go for a tandem that weekend. I went up by myself, I drove myself, and I told the instructor, Soko, I said, I'm only going to do this once. So can we do some flips or something? And he did. We did like 2 front flips out the door, which was beautiful. And I immediately did my second tandem that day, which was a lot because I was so broke at the time. But I was on fire, James. It was like something came alive inside of me. And so I started to save all of my money from the doctor's office for my next jump. And after my third tandem, they said, Alethia, you've got to get your license. And I thought, that's way too much money. There's no way I could afford that. But I did. I saved and I saved. So like every month or every 3 months, depending on my budget, I would go do an AFF jump. And the process of driving from LA, those 2.5 hours to the drop zone with my windows down and my dog Echo in the back, it felt like things were just melting away from me and that I was really back to myself. And it was such a huge process for me, those drives and those jumps. I could go on the plane and feel like I would potentially maybe, have an accident from the skydiving, or maybe I would die from it. All of the fears that you're going through, especially at that phase when you're skydiving. And I would be able to take this inventory of my life, which was very powerful at the time of, does my mom know I love her? Do my brothers and sisters know I love them? Was I good? Have I been good? Like, can I do better? Yeah. Do I forgive myself for that? Yeah. Okay. Where can I do better? And I would have those thoughts on the airplane ride. And so that would kind of keep me sharp in terms of my value system in between those skydives. And it was just such a powerful thing. So it was the adrenaline, and it was the learning and facing fear and all that, but it was also kind of keeping me in check on the ground. And yeah, because I'm a bit of I really love being alive. I take great joy in silent moments outside. A butterfly flies past me and I'm like, look at that, to myself. So after a jump, I would be looking at the sky and like filled with joy. So skydiving for me was this really massive experience inside in my inner world, where it was the fun and the jumps and all of that, but it was like lighting me up inside in ways that I hadn't really experienced yet.
When I read that, I've heard you express that before, and I thought, wow, what a contrast of feeling so alive while simultaneously being fearful of death and still pushing forward despite the fear, and yet taking that fear and working that into favor of presence. And am I okay where I am in life if it is not to continue? Am I right with my people? Am I right with myself? I actually get goosebumps referring to that. It's very brave to have pushed through it, but also, wow, what a return, what a gift.
Such a gift.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long did that continue, these journeys to Cal City?
Yeah. That was about the first, I would say, 2 or 3 years of my skydiving. It took me about 2 years or a year and a half to get my license. As long as I could jump there, I did. It was my home drop zone. It was Wild West. It was just anything goes out there, and it was a little bit desolate as well. There was nobody cool up there. Everybody was just doing it for the love of the sport. There's a lot of old timers, and it felt like home. It felt like Southern Oregon, the good side of it. So it felt very, very small towny up there, which was beautiful. It really did teach me so much about facing death. And I think that's where I started to really explore death in some ways. And of course, they're faced with that in the sport because of the nature of the sport and how many friends we lose over the years. But that was really the first time in my life I started to think about the fact that it's real, and then what that means for the days that we're alive. And that expansion of reality of what death is has, I believe, created such power for me in my living days. So I'm forever grateful to that experience, and also to Cal City for being the vehicle for me for all of these really big inner journeys.
Most people don't like to think about death, but it must be very freeing to do so, because it now creates perspective to be free of the entanglements of the day-to-day grind of whatever it is we're grinding on. It's a really interesting perception, because many people don't like to really think about it and what that looks like and what does it mean. And wow, you're a deep soul, Alethia.
I was on my run before this podcast, and I was thinking about, so I'm going to go sit in ceremony again in about a little over 3 weeks. And you're faced with a lot of these types of inner journeys as well. And in the last maybe 10 years, I've really started to become aware that, like, the people that you start to see a lot, or just randomly, we're the people that are doing life together. Even if it's that person that you've been living next door to that drives you absolutely crazy, this is actually one of your people that you're doing life down here with. And it's very interesting, because we can kind of put people like, oh, they're not a part of my world, but they actually really are. The people that you're in contact with are a part of your life experience. So I started to think about, I'm facing death a lot, and I have been, it's been really, really top of mind for me in a pretty healthy way for me. And through ceremony and plant medicines, it's also really top of mind. And it's translated into the people that I really love. I really cherish the moments that, like, a token of time is so big. This moment that we're having here, right? Like, we're connecting. We are having this moment, and it's something I'm so grateful for, because we really don't get these many moments. Even the people that we see a lot, there's not actually that many of them. And it could be that I've been pondering this death thing for a long time, or it could be the stage of my life that I'm in, but it's very powerful. We're all going to do it. We can guarantee that. And I feel that there's fear with it, for sure, of course. I mean, if I start to guide my mind into the scary parts of it, it could be a little bit overwhelming. But I actually think about it in terms of, I feel comfortable in what happens after death. I don't know what it is, but I feel comfortable in it. So this reality of us eventually dying is what kind of creates this fire in our lives to really show up with everything, to tell people that we love them, to get the most we can, to squeeze all of the juice out of this life experience, because it just goes by so fast.
It goes by so fast. I think about that a lot, Alethia. I don't know why, but I remember being about 10, 11, 12 years old, maybe even younger, but just having, this is weird, and I'm not even sure why this is coming into my thought process, but I remember in the early aspects of the AIDS epidemic and being really frightened, because I remember watching the news and realizing how many people were dying. And I think that was my early consciousness of death. And then further along, as I got to about 10, 11, 12 years old, I've always had a great awareness of time. Like, I've never heard my peer group ever talk about it. And I don't know if, I left home at a very young age. I left at age 13 to go to school abroad. but I just always knew that I need to suck up everything that I possibly can, every opportunity, because time is so fleeting. And something that I've been wrestling with, and I wanted to talk to you about this because you have often referenced making a mark. And I think about that a lot. And sometimes I think, is that ego driven in terms of legacy? Life is so short. I can't change the world, but I want to change the world that I'm involved in, because why not? Like, let's just make it better because it's so fleeting. And it's not great for everybody. Everybody has their own challenges. My question to you is, tell me about what I've heard you express before in making a mark. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. You know, I'm not leaving kids behind, so I don't really need to leave a legacy. Like, we're pretty much returning to the dust anyways. And I don't feel any pressure to have a statue in front of a grocery store that's the Alethea statue. But we're all really carrying so much with us. And this is one thing that ceremonies have taught me is people come in and they have all these beautiful faces and everybody looks different, different skin tones, different hair, different clothing, different everything, right? Different builds. What I've learned is that speaking and witnessing these people in their journey, oh my gosh, people are walking around with a lot. And we're all just out there in the world showing up with our social faces on at the grocery store and the bank and, you know, in social settings. But we're holding something. And so to me, and I don't always get this right, of course, because I'm human, it's so important to me to try to change the energy in the situation that I'm in that would hopefully let people be seen or let them feel safe or inspired or lifted in some way. We have the choice. Like, we're going to make an impact no matter what, right? Even if you walk into the room and you think nobody's really witnessing me, I'm just going to be over here huddled and quiet, you still are contributing in some way. And so we can decide what that contribution is. I tell my groups when we meet and we're a 5-way or something, we're either taking or we're giving into that shared bucket of energy. And that's gonna be what we really remember from the day. And so you give to it or you pull from it. And I really, really get so much energy from feeling someone and knowing I can just with such minimal energy give them a little boost or a little lift. And we all get to do that, whether or not we're aware of it and whether or not we choose it.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective to have. And if I were to have empathy being in your shoes, I would feel honored and humbled to be in that position to help facilitate. And you're right. I've been very fortunate in my life, and I'm aware that, yeah, there's so many, right? The people that I know or that I see are burdened with so much. Yeah, it's a heavy load to carry. I often think about, you just never know what people are going through. You just never know. And so give some grace. Give some grace. In the linear conversation of when you were in Amsterdam, of course, you would move on to really working at Skydive Spain and really getting into skydiving at that point. Can you share with us your journey of what that looked like? Because it seemed like skydiving was your passion, but it really intensified to another level while there. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. When I moved to Amsterdam, I was riding motorcycles in LA, I was surfing, I was running marathons, and I was skydiving. Those were like my 4 pillars of absolute joy and athleticism. And I divvied out my time equally amongst all of them. And so I moved to Amsterdam. I did not have a motorcycle. I went to test drive one and I thought, oh, it's not quite as fun as riding through the mountains of LA. So I didn't buy the motorcycle. So that was out. Surfing was not the same as, surfing in my bikini in Venice Beach. It was like really cold over there. The waves weren't great. So surfing was out. Running, I did a little bit, but it was weather dependent. It was quite flat, and I was right in the heart of Amsterdam. So that was out. Skydiving in the Dutch community, you can do it, but it's just a couple months out of the year. So I one day was like, I got nothing left. I have to make skydiving work. So I found a drop zone. I Googled skydiving and I landed on Skydive Spain, bought some tickets, flew out there alone. And I was still on rental gear at that stage. Went out there, didn't know a soul, rented some gear and spent about 2 weeks out there. Got to know a little bit the staff. And then that became what I started to do. I'd go back to Amsterdam for a couple weeks. I'd work my butt off. And then I'd fly back to Spain for 2 weeks, bring my laptop, still be working, but start jumping again. And I started to do it so much that I got to know the owners of Skydive Spain. And, at that time was working in the games industry as a marketing director. And I started to tell Skydive Spain, hey, if you did this, it's going to help. So I started to give them a little bit of free advice. And throughout years of going out there, at some point, they offered me a job to come work for them. Yeah, when I took that job, it was at the same time there was another drop zone, very well known, that was offering me a job as well. But Skydive Spain and Skydive Algarve, Skydive Hibbelstow had a little bit of a broken, kind of old school way of marketing the drop zones, and I thought I could really do something here. I was really in a building phase of marketing. I really loved taking brands or entrepreneurs from nothing to something. That like build process was so exciting to me. So it kind of checked the boxes for that. But during that time, it was like, that was my hobby. It was skydiving. It was work. It was my friends, yoga, and skydiving. So my progression and my jump numbers just started to really climb at that time.
But you weren't known for really your vertical abilities at that time.
Oh gosh.
Were you?
No, I was, I went over there. I think I fudged my numbers a little bit to be able to do some of the things. Like I remember I was working for a company and we were launching a product called Game Stick. And the CEO of the company knew I was a skydiver. So they said, hey, how about you fly this massive flag that says Game Stick for our launch, our product launch? And I said, that sounds great. No problem. So I went to Spain. I had probably 200 jumps and had no clue what I was doing. Fibbed my numbers a little bit to be able to jump with this massive flag, flew the flag. But at that time, like I had no skills. I was coming from a drop zone where we were doing horny gorillas and nothing really. We were just getting out together. We were just getting out of the plane and having fun. So I kind of took that to Spain, and then I started to see like, oh, there's levels to these things. Like people are doing this in a really focused way. I'm kind of into that. At that time, I was just jumping my butt off, trying to learn how to track because I saw some cool kids doing that. So I was learning how to backtrack. And then there was a woman named Palm. She's an absolute queen who came out to stay at my house. And she had just gotten back from the women's world record. And this was, probably around, I guess it would have been 2017, 16, 15, somewhere around there. And she sat in my kitchen over coffee and told me about the women's world record, the head down world record. And it sounded like heaven, James. I love women. I love women friendships. It's so big in my life. And so this description of like 60 women getting together, supporting each other, having fun, being there for one another, holding hands in the sky was like, oh, everything I ever wanted in the sport. And I did not fly head down at all. So I said to myself, I want to fly in the next women's world record, and I'm going to make this happen. I started to learn how to fly head down in the sky, which is two ways. It can be done, not recommended. It takes a very long time, but I had no budget for tunnel at that time. And that's how basically I started LSD camps. I got good enough to be able to fly head down in 4 or 5 ways, but there weren't enough people at that drop zone for me to practice big ways. So I started this camp with a girlfriend, Juliana, And we created these camps to have people come to me so that I could have the practice to be able to learn how to fly big waves. And that's pretty much how I learned to fly big waves for the women's world record.
That is so smart. And that is a marketing brain at work. I absolutely appreciate that. Wow. So you put together the camps for people to learn so that you can learn yourself and essentially offset the expenses for yourself. Wow, that is so incredible. This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. I mean, who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. But if you're curious about what the amazing people of Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. I read in 2020 you went to India. What did that experience do for you?
Yeah, that was a really beautiful experience. I was in the process of leaving the Swallow drop zones, which is Skydive Spain, Skydive Algarve, and Skydive Hibbelstow, after a beautiful time spent there. And it was out of the blue, the industry just started to ask me to coach. It wasn't something I was pursuing in the least bit, zero intention to do that. But because of a little bit of my name getting out there with LSD and then the marketing director, people just they just knew my name. I was working with Tora Tora. So people started to ask me to coach, and the Swallows, they were so gracious. They said, just don't turn any event down. That's great for our drop zone. You just go get it. Well, it ended up that I worked 29 events that year. I was on the road constantly, still managing my team and marketing and doing this life on the road. And at that point, it was a little bit exhausting. I decided to go full power into the coaching because I thought at that point, I'm 40. I'm just going to do it. This is totally weird. Doesn't make any sense. And I'm going to go for it. So it was that transition period where the moment that I left the company, I booked a trip with a girlfriend and we just went to India it was about 6 weeks. And it was gorgeous, like really beautiful. I studied some more yoga there. I'd already been practicing as a teacher. So I went and topped off a little bit, earned some more skills in yoga. And really, I gave a presentation at a school in Bangladesh from fifth grade down. And then I gave a presentation to the teachers. And it was all about how if you just have the tiniest of an idea, that is actually a dream that will build into a reality, which was very true for my life. And then I was, walking around India and just really taking in the culture. It was something that was, for me, very emotional in a way, on a beautiful, beautiful side of things, of just seeing this culture so devoted to faith and a culture so devoted to kindness, where everything that they did was in service to faith. It was in service to their God, and it was in service to each other. So it was a very beautiful experience.
Sounds incredible. What a journey you've been on. Tell me, Alethia, what does a typical day look like for you?
Oh gosh. I'm a big process girl, James. I wake up very early. I'm very much a morning person. So yeah, life on the road has definitely taken a lot of my very healthy habits and secured them into like no fail habits, right? So I wake up very, very early, usually just like I can't wait for the alarm. If I have alarm, I can't wait for the morning. And then I go into breath work and meditation and writing and hydration and all of my beautiful supplements. And then after that, it's really, if it's a coaching day, it's kind of looking at the day that I have ahead and making some plans with those students on my notepad, and then going out and spending a day giving 100% there. If it's a project day for my events or something that I've got brewing with the wellness side of things, then it's usually pretty productive, like fingers firing away on the keyboard, working in that creative space. And then if it's a writing day for Skydive Nag, then it's a little bit of the same, but it always starts with intention and process, which lays the foundation for me to really feel like I'm activated and ready for the day. And then the evening has a big wind down phase as well. So I usually bring it down into a softer energy, something ready to lead me into the bed where I'm feeling very relaxed and ready for that 8 hours of sleep.
I didn't hear you say that the moment you wake up, you look at your iPhone, and then the last thing you do going to bed is look at your iPhone.
No, and listen, I use all the devices just like anybody else. I would say 85% of the time, I have control over my use of the devices. Something maybe will disrupt it in a way where maybe I'm in an Airbnb with 4 other coaches somewhere and there's really no place for me to go and I can't do my processes or I'm behind on them for some reason. It doesn't happen that often, but once in a while. And I'll get into a little bit of that, like, oh, okay, I'm awake. I'll have my coffee. I can't really do these things. So I'll open up the phone and I can immediately notice that doesn't really feel good. So I try to stay away from, like, I've got some settings on my phone where I'm awake with myself, like truly with myself before I ever log on to anything, before I touch a device. And that feels really good.
That requires discipline.
It does.
I feel challenged to follow in your footsteps because I would like that. If you could recommend a book to somebody, or rather, what book has impacted you greatly that you would recommend?
Boy, I love that question. So, Eating Animals is a really good book from a carnivore. And it's one I think that is important for us to read. Yeah. I know the industry knows that I'm plant-based, and I'm plant-based with love, and I'm plant-based with no judgment whatsoever. But it's super important to be aware of where we're buying our food from and what impact that has on not just the planet, not just the food system, but also the animals. And so it's a really beautiful book by a carnivorous family who've done a lot of research into it. I found it very interesting.
Great recommendation. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
We were going to say another one.
Yeah. And then Viktor Frankl is just the way that he writes Man's Search for Meaning is so beautiful. It's something that it has never left me from the very first time I read it. And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful way to look at despair and also hope.
This is going to be a predictable question, but I'm always curious about it, Alethia, about people's crossroads moments in life. And I think many of us really just by almost any decision is creating or creating a path. But to help define what I'm saying is perhaps in your journey that maybe you met somebody that seemed like a chance encounter, but that meeting of that person changes the course of your life, or by making a decision of saying yes to something or no to something puts you in a direction that maybe you hadn't met that person. Maybe you hadn't said yes. Maybe you hadn't said no. That it's likely you and I are not even having this conversation right now. Can you think of a crossroads moment that seemed almost innocuous but changed the entire trajectory of your life?
That's a really deep question, James. I feel like there has been some kind of divine orchestration of my life, and I've been so incredibly blessed to be lifted and guided by so many incredible humans who either saw something in me or they just showed me a way of truth and love and energy that there's really quite a lot to name. Yeah. There's so many to name. I've got so many names running through my mind right now. There's just, I couldn't even possibly pull one that would be higher than another. I've been really, really blessed with such an incredible tribe in my life.
There's a spark about you that you acknowledge. And off air, I randomly mentioned that there was a speaker that gave me a lot of hope in when I was young and unsure of how I was going to make my way into the world. And that speaker was a man named Les Brown. Les's story comes from abject poverty and is arguably one of the greatest speakers that has ever taken a stage. But he talks about in some of his presentations that the mark is on you. And that's how I feel about you, Alethia. The mark is on you. Yeah, you are a bright light in this world. And I'm so humbled, honored to say, I'm your friend. I'm your friend. So thank you for all for the energy that you bring and how present you are. This world is better with you in it.
Appreciate that so much, James. I receive that with so much love, and I'm just so grateful to call you a friend as well. And to all of your listeners as well, they can hear your absolute clear energy, and that is just something that's so outstanding about you as well. So it's a mutual respect and a mutual love.
As we close, Alethia, if somebody wants to participate in either your wellness, I don't want to call it camp, but wellness retreats perhaps, and or jump with you, how do they get in touch?
Yeah, I'm happy to receive people through email, ajaustin@gmail.com, or I'm on Instagram, Alethia J. Austin, or on Facebook, Alethia J. Austin.
Alethia, this has been great. I'm so grateful for our time, and I can't wait for everyone to hear our conversation today, because I think it's going to provide value and maybe some thought. I certainly leave here challenged, going, I learned a lot today, and I want to apply some of what I've learned to my own life, and I really want to dig into that book that you referenced, really both of them. So thank you. It's been great.
Thank you, James. Thank you, listeners.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.